So good afternoon. My name is Rohini Bhattacharya, Director of Apprenticeships at Pearson, and I will be delivering the webinar today on EPA processes and workflow. Before we start off, I'll introduce some of my colleagues who are with me in the room today. So we've got Sapna Kimani, who's the Marketing Manager for Pearson for Apprenticeships. And we've got Lauren Smithers, also a marketing associate with Pearson. So today we will be talking about EPA processes, talking about the letter of intent through to EPA results, timelines that you need to follow for EPA delivery. We're going to talk about the smart EPA system. Some of you might have been onboarded by our customer services team already, and some of you might have already got some emails from us asking or requesting for more information. So we'll talk about that and where we are on that. I want to talk about data management. It's increasingly becoming critical for us to manage this proactively. Finally, I will do some what-if sessions in terms of just giving you an idea of, depending on where you are with your apprentices on their learning journey, just some scenarios to highlight what you should be doing from a process perspective if you have apprentices at different stages of the learning program. And then finally, we'll share some contacts and support team for you to reach out to within our organization to agree next steps or understand a bit more about our processes. So let's kick off with our EPA processes. What you see on the screen there, on the left-hand side, I will describe some of the stages, and they do work in a sequence. So it's the first stage happens first before the next stage happens. So it is sort of sequential. And on the right-hand side, I will then discuss some of the documents, templates, data, system that are related to that particular stage. A lot of you would be going through these stages already, but maybe more clarity is required. The other thing I would say is, as we are progressing in terms of our experience of delivering EPAs, we do change our processes. So it's difficult to keep up with them, but it's important to keep up with them. It's important for us to review our processes so that we can simplify them and make your and our lives easier. So the first stage, when you are thinking about endpoint assessments, or indeed when you're thinking about an apprentice who you have taken on for training, is the expression of interest phase. Following an expression of interest, there's a contracting phase. Now, some providers might want to go on to contracting directly instead of the expression of interest. That's absolutely fine. I think we had introduced the expression of interest stage last year just to get more visibility around the numbers and the standards that we would need to get ready for a certain time. But increasingly, we are recommending to our customers that you can go into contracting directly. After you've signed a contract with us, there is an onboarding and preparation phase, and that is primarily for the provider, but essentially it's both for the provider, the employer, and also the apprentice to an extent. We have seen, we're getting more and more evidence that the more prepared the apprentices, the more prepared the training provider is, there are higher chances of success at EPA as well. So it's very, very important for us to make sure that this onboarding and preparation phase is carried out from start to finish. After the preparation phase, there is a lot of data and information to be exchanged, collated, collected, both from the training provider's perspective, from the apprentice's perspective. So I'll just go through some of those details. Most of that information can now be put straight away onto Smart EPA. So that's a huge improvement on our processes, and it's a very, very important stage as well in our processes. Finally, when we have got all of that information and the data, we move on to the EPA booking stage, wherein the provider actually requests the booking. And once the booking has been confirmed, the EPA delivery actually takes place in practice. Following the EPA delivery, there are results and feedback, resets if required, and then finally a data upload for us to claim the certificate on behalf of the apprentice. So let's move on to the right-hand side, and I'll probably not go through each of them in detail, but just to highlight some of the documents and templates that you must be familiar with already. So at the expression of interest, we talk about what we call a letter of intent, which has details of the provider, the employer, the standard, the number of apprentices. It's basically a commitment from both sides, from Pearson side and from the provider side, to commit to using Pearson as the EPA organization. Our contract agreement, most of you should have had sight of this by now. So it's essentially, that is our commercial agreement to have an exchange of fee, an exchange of monetary value between Pearson and the provider, or Pearson and the employer provider. We have now introduced what we're calling an EPA services framework contract, which we can use for multiple employers for a single provider. So I appreciate the fact that a lot of you are working with a number of different employers, hundreds of them sometimes, and it's difficult to have a single contract for a single employer. So we've made some changes in that process to make it easier for you. The onboarding and preparation phase, as I mentioned, this is a very, very important phase. And some of you might have had EPA planning meetings with our apprenticeship services managers. And these are the things that you go through during that onboarding phase. So you have access to the specification. At the moment, we can use Smart EPA to give you access to all of these things. The testing software, what kind of evidence documentation you need to submit for the apprentice, the preparation details, the logistics around delivery, gateway period, timelines for delivery. All of those things have been covered during the EPA planning meeting. With the introduction of Smart EPA, we are going to cut down our EPA planning meetings, so we no longer need our EPA planning meetings in the extensive format that we have been carrying it out for. And the reason being that once you have signed a contract and you have access as a user to Smart EPA, you can access all of these documents on Smart EPA directly. And there are only a few logistical questions which we would need to find out a bit more about, because all of the details about the apprentice, their data specific to the standard, can all be captured directly on Smart EPA. So we've reduced that massive step of you having to fill out a Google Sheet or a Word document, etc., etc. The data and information. Now, there are several different categories of data and information that we need to collect. So there are some provider level details, as you can see on the screen. There are some employer level details that you need to see on the screen. And there are some apprentice details that you are seeing on the screen. And all those three different categories, we need to collect extensive information and data for these. And the reason for that is that, like you do your ILR returns on data for the drawdown on funding, in a similar way, we need to return the data to the ESFA for them to be able to draw down the levy funding from the employer's pot. So the Smart EPA system allows us to enter, or rather, I should rephrase, the Smart EPA system makes it essential for us to collect all of these details right from the start, so that when it comes to the completion and uploading of our data to the ESFA portal, we already have all of this information, and the drawdown of the levy becomes much easier. That's the reason we have been pushing to get all of this information, but it's absolutely essential to ensure that you get paid for the apprenticeships that you complete, and we get paid for the EPAs that we complete as well. Our EPA booking system, so we are using a combination of Smart EPA and, of course, our in-house EPA delivery team in order to schedule the dates in collaboration and in consultation with the provider and the assessor. The EPA delivery happens through sort of on-screen tests, through us sending out independent assessors, and also having a backup team of internal quality assurance assessors as well. Results and feedback. Currently, our SLA is 5 working days, and we are sticking to that. Our notification of results would happen through the Smart EPA, and this would be via an email to the provider, and if the employer wishes, to them directly as well. You need to let us know if the employer is interested to get the notification of results directly. We do not currently send any communications out to the apprentices directly. So when I talk about registering your apprentices, I will highlight that there is a field for you to complete an email address for the apprentices, but it's not essential for you to fill that in with the correct email address for the apprentices, because we will not be using that to send any communication out to the apprentice. The resets are pretty much in the same way as the EPA delivery, so the same things happen at that point. And finally, once the apprentice has successfully completed their EPA, on the 4th working day of each month, we do an upload onto the ESFA data portal for all the apprentices who have completed their EPAs via Pearson. As training providers, you need to use that information. Well, you need to use the completion information to also update the ILR at your end. That's when the completion funding would get triggered by ESFA as well at your end. There's a dual data return, if you like. So in terms of the team that sits behind each of these stages, and you would have, I'm hoping that most of you would have interacted with most of these team members. There are account managers who manage the expression of interest and the contracting stages. We then have the apprenticeship services managers and the customer services team, who are also called the account specialist team in Manchester, who are managing the onboarding and the preparation phase. Same team also, in collaboration with the EPA delivery team, also are involved in the collation of all the data and information. Now, this is how it's working currently with the sort of physical EPA planning meetings. More and more, we're trying to push that to move over to the smart EPA as soon as possible. And we really need your help on this. The EPA booking is managed by the EPA delivery team administrators. From next week onwards, we are trying to have a proactive approach to reach out to our customers who have got their apprentices registered on smart EPA. So some of you might be getting calls from our administrators here in the head office. The EPA delivery team, we have the independent assessors who can be freelance or independent, or indeed working for Pearson. We also have the quality assurance team, and we also have the on-screen test support team, which is part of our Manchester customer services team. Results and feedback are managed by the Pearson EPA delivery team directly. Resets, again, it's the same EPA delivery team that manage that, and the EPA delivery team and the training provider have equal responsibility for the data upload. We will do the upload for the ESFA portal, and the training provider would do the upload for the ILR return. Some of you might have seen this already in the last webinar in September, but I just wanted to reinforce the timelines for completion. On the left, you will see all of the actions that need to be completed, and the blue highlighted ones are Pearson actions, whereas the other ones, the gray or the white ones, are essentially actions to be completed by the training provider or the employer provider. So the signed contract, and on the timelines on the right-hand side column, what I would say is that that's the latest or the last chance for you to actually do that. If you do not do it within those timelines, then unfortunately we will have to rejig the whole timetable to match those timelines. So what we are saying here is that the signed contract should be returned as a minimum 3 months, so latest 3 months prior to your first EPA. So if you've got your first EPA in January, end of January, for example, you should have a signed contract today in hand and returned to the account managers. Once you've returned the signed contract, you are able to register your apprentices on smart EPA, and we are recommending that you should register your apprentices at least 2 months prior to your anticipated EPA date. As soon as you register your apprentices, we will make provisional assessor allocations, because then we have visibility of the apprentice, the standard, the location where they'll be taking, and also the dates that they potentially will be taking their EPA. So we will make provisional allocations, and that happens 2 weeks from the date that you register the apprentices on smart EPA. When you register the apprentices, you are also able to access any standard-specific EPA resources. In fact, even prior to registering your apprentices, when you get a user access account on Smart EPA, you should be able to access all of the resources for the specific EPA that you're delivering. And again, we recommend that you do this at least 2 months prior to the anticipated EPA date. As part of preparing for EPAs, we recommend that you attend one of our EPA preparatory webinars. Liz Bennett, who's the head of EPA delivery, is currently running these on a bespoke customer demand perspective, but we will shortly be moving on to slots of webinars from January onwards. Once you have registered the apprentices and closer to the time that the apprentice is ready to take their EPA, you need to complete the EPA planning checklist. Again, these are all available on Smart EPA now, and we are recommending that you should do this after you've done the webinar, after you attended the EPA preparation webinar, but before you hit the gateway timeline. And once you've completed the planning checklist, you can complete the gateway checklist. Again, this is available on a standard basis on Smart EPA. You need to upload evidence documents for each of those checklists, and we recommend that you do this latest at least 3 weeks prior to the anticipated EPA date. Once we have checked all of those documentations, we will confirm the assessor allocations. We are saying that we would do that 48 hours after the gateway checklist has been completed, and we are satisfied that all of the documents that have been uploaded are correct and appropriate. Once we have done the actual EPA delivery, which will happen offline, then our results turnaround SLA is 5 working days after the last component of the EPA has been assessed. I've put an asterisk around the anticipated EPA date and the fact that you need to register the apprentices on Smart EPA 2 months prior to the EPA date. That is a specific clause within the contract. So I'm just calling it out here so that, because we've had experiences where we're getting 2 weeks' notice instead of 2 months to carry out an EPA. And from our experience, it's absolutely essential that that preparation period takes place for the apprentice and the provider and the employer. And you have access and you've actually read through the documentation that's required, because a lot of providers are still thinking about SAFE frameworks when they think about assessments. I just want to reiterate that Pearson have the right to change the date on Smart EPA if we feel that you have not given us enough notice. If you think it's absolutely urgent and we do have the capacity to deliver, we are more than happy to do that, but please do give us a call. We're not going to turn down yourselves being a valued customer, but we would definitely not want to disadvantage the learner in this case. So Smart EPA, if some of you had attended our webinar update on the 27th of September, we had talked about sending out email communications on the 15th of October to all of the key contacts that we have, requesting additional details for employers and apprentices. That did happen on the 15th. We have got a very low response rate, unfortunately. It's only 26% of the emails that were sent out actually got back to us with the completed details. So we are sort of reaching out individually, but any training providers or employers who have returned that information to us have now all been uploaded onto Smart EPA. And I'm assuming that some of you would have been onboarded by our customer services team already, and some of you are probably waiting to get that access as well on Smart EPA. So yes, customer services are at hand and they are ready to onboard any customers who have signed a contract with us onto Smart EPA. In terms of EPA contract, I can't sort of reiterate enough that if you do not have a contract, you will not be onboarded onto Smart EPA. That's the first stage that we need to do in order for us to get you set up on Smart EPA. If you have signed one contract, i.e. You have signed a contract which has a single employer, but you now have several employers, then our customer services team in Manchester are now sending out the framework contract to reflect the additional employers for you as a training provider. So if you haven't already got that contract, please just look out for that. You should be, the named person on that single contract should be getting a revised contract with details of all the employers that the provider is working with. In terms of onboarding, we do have a link on our website. I'll just go to that in a little bit later. So Smart EPA and what we mean by Smart EPA, we've explained that on our website. In terms of what you need to do on Smart EPA, there are just 4 actions that we are asking you to do at the moment. So you need to register your apprentices for the employers that you have contracted with. You can access all of the EPA resources for specific standards through Smart EPA. You need to complete the standard-specific gateway checklists per apprentice on Smart EPA, and then finally upload all the evidence documentation per apprentice for each of the EPAs. So as I mentioned, onboarding support is available through the account specialist team. That's the number on the screen, and that's how you actually access as a training provider who is interested in Pearson as an EPA organization. And finally, we also have created a specific user guide on our website that will help you through a stage-by-stage, screen-by-screen shot of how to use Smart EPA. But of course, account specialist team would be more than happy to walk you through that as well. So I'll just quickly go through our link on our website. So this is the page link on our website which talks about Smart EPA, and we've got some key questions there which I'm hoping would be helpful for you to understand a bit more. So we've got the details of what you need to do, and underneath that, as you can see, there is a user guide. This is what you sort of get onboarded onto. So it's, as you can see, there's a screen-by-screen shot of what you can do on Smart EPA, and our customer services team will walk you through each of these stages. So essentially, this is what the guide covers. This guide is freely available on our website. So if you think that you just want to have a handle around it, our customer services team would be more than happy to create a user account for you, but you need to have signed a contract with us before then. Jumping back in, data management. So again, I'll pause there slightly to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. First question is the EPA date the expected end date?
So there are 3 dates that need to be specified on Smart EPA. The first is the apprenticeship start date, which is the date that your apprentices started the learning. The second is the EPA expected start date. We are recommended that that's the gateway start date that you list there. And then there is an EPA apprenticeship expected end date. And we are recommended that is 2 months from the EPA expected start date, so that matches up with what we are saying in terms of when you need to register your apprentices on Smart EPA and when we can actually realistically deliver the EPA as well.
Another question, what is the timeline for results again?
So the results SLA, service level agreement, that we are following currently is 5 working days. So that's 5 working days from the date that the last component was assessed. So for example, if an EPA has 3 different components, customer services, for example, you've got the observation, you've got the professional discussion, and you've got a third element there, which I can't remember, unfortunately. But the professional discussion would be the last one to take place, and it's 5 working days after that last component has been assessed that we would deliver the results.
Then you just come back and said, actually, it's not the results that were after the reset dates.
Right, so reset dates. Now, there are some standards where it's very specific around the timeline for the resets. I think adult care is an example wherein you have to pass the multiple choice test before you go on to the professional discussion. And I think they allow for just one reset for that one. At the moment, we have not enforce any time period within which the resets need to take place. However, what we have found is that some of the employers are quite specific around when they want all of the whole of the EPA to be completed, including the resets. What we do propose is that the resets are scheduled within 3 weeks of the first take. And that gives us sufficient notice to actually schedule and book an assessor as well. By all means, when we are looking at booking assessments, when you're booking the EPA assessments, our advice would be that you do pencil in a first reset just as a precautionary measure, so we can actually have that capacity built in into our assessor workforce as well.
Okay, another question. How many members within a centre can have a user account on Smart EPA?
So you can have, we would recommend that you have at least 3 people set up as users on Smart EPA. We will set up the first one ourselves because we've got their contact details, and it's realistically, it's nearly always a person who has their name on the contract because those are the details we have. If you do want to set up additional users, you just need to email the customer services team, the account specialist team. They will follow their usual process for security checks. And you need to send the names of the additional users to the account specialist team, and they can set them up as users as well. There is no upper limit of the number of users that can be set up, but what I would suggest is if you do have users, multiple users, then just make sure that you have the right kind of controls in place. If people leave within your organization, please make sure that you deactivate them. Our license agreement does not preclude that there are set number of users per customer organization. So you can have as many users, but a minimum of 3 would be recommended.
No more questions, we can carry on.
Okay, I'll carry on from there. So data management, we talked about some of the data required from an ESFA perspective, and I've just put down the fact that some of the data requirements that we need to collect on Smart EPA are both from the ESFA perspective, but also from the Smart EPA perspective, because Smart EPA is built to collect all of this information to make it easier for us to actually upload the information onto Smart EPA. So From a levy drawdown of employers perspective, we need the employer reference number, which is typically given to every business that registers with HMRC. It's also known as the PAYE reference. So it's not very difficult to find, but you can't find it in the public domain. So any employer who is paying taxes, and I'm assuming all of the employers, including SMEs, actually do pay taxes, they will be registered with the HMRC, and their employer should be able to give it to you fairly quickly and easily. In terms of the training provider details, again, these are ILR requirements, and we have been collecting it. And again, these are essential data fields to collect. So all of you are familiar with the UK PRN number, the address details of the provider, and we do need contact name and details and these are essential for us to sort of onboard users onto SEPA as well, Smart EPA. And then in terms of the apprentice, the details we need would be specifically the ULN number. We also need to link the employer and the training provider with the apprentice. We do collect personal details, and all of this information obviously goes into the ILR by default. So we do collect data, date of birth, address, gender, funding status for the apprentice. The email, as I mentioned, is optional. You can put in the training provider details if you want to, access any information, especially the notification of results for the provider, but you can put in a dummy email address as well if you need to. And then the dates, as I was explaining, the dates are really important. So there are 3 dates on Smart EPA: the apprenticeship start date, the EPA expected start date, and the apprenticeship expected end date, which we are recommending that you complete as being 2 months after the EPA expected start date. The EPA expected start date is the gateway start date for all practical purposes. Hierarchy you see there, so the bold phrases, that's how our data on Smart EPA is set up. So when we ask for all of this data, we need to enter the details of the employers onto Smart EPA. Then we need to enter the details of the training provider. The training provider gets linked to an employer or more than one employer. And only after we have entered the details of the employer and the training provider can we upload the details of the apprentice. So the data entry on Smart EPA needs to follow the sequence, without which we are not able to onboard the customer, i.e. the training provider, onto Smart EPA. So it's very, very essential that we collect this data. It's essential that you provide this data to us as soon as possible, and that will help and expedite your onboarding process fairly quickly. I'll just discuss some what-if scenarios just to highlight some of the journeys or some of the situations that you might be in. So what if, and I know this might be self-explanatory already, what if your apprentices are starting their on-program learning now? Again, the first question we would ask is, have you signed a contract with us? If you have signed a contract with us, then your account specialist team, if you've signed a contract for some employer, an employer, the account specialist team can do a variation for any additional employer that will be involved, and they can then onboard you onto Smart EPA. If you haven't signed an EPA services contract, needless to say, you need to do that at the first instance. Please speak to your account manager. They would be able to whiz off the contract to you, or do email us on epadelivery@pearson.com. Second scenario, if you have an apprentice and they are reaching gateway now, again, have you signed an EPA services contract with the employer, with Pearson for that particular employer? If you have, then your account specialist team should have onboarded you by now. If they have onboarded you, then you need to enter your apprentice details onto Smart EPA as soon as possible. If the account specialist team have not onboarded you, please do call them on this number. That number is available on the Smart EPA link on our website as well. If you obviously haven't signed a contract with us, then again, speak to your account manager or email us at epadelivery@pearson.com. Third scenario, if you have apprentices who are ready for EPA now, again, you should have signed an EPA services contract. You should have been onboarded by the account specialist team on Smart EPA. If you have entered the apprentice details on Smart EPA, then the next question I will ask is whether you have attended an EPA preparation webinar. If you have, that's great. The EPA Pearson delivery team should be in touch with you starting from next week onwards. If you haven't had the opportunity to be onboarded onto Smart EPA, please do call the account specialist team or the customer services team on that number on the screen. If you have not entered the apprentice details onto Smart EPA and you need some support in registering these apprentices, or you have a number of apprentices who need a bulk upload, please do speak to the account specialist team again. And as always, if you haven't signed the contract, that's the first thing that you need to do. So please do get in touch with us. So a couple of details of contacts and support team. Your first point of contact would be the account specialist team on those numbers and those options that you select. If you can't get through to them, please do email us. We do monitor that inbox during office hours only, but we will get back to you within 48 hours following your email. So those are the contact details for you to get in touch with. And that's all I think we need to cover today.
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
So the first question is with regards to the end date. So is the end date that goes on the ILR, is this the date that is provided on the 4th working day, or is this the date when the results are submitted, or is this the date when the EPA is completed?
I would suggest that that's the date that the EPA is completed. That should be the end date. The results would come 5 days after that. That has nothing to do with learning. If, of course, there is a reset scenario, then you probably need to wait for the results. So I would suggest that you probably need to wait to see the results before you put that date into the ILR. But there's no reason why you can't backdate that date for the date that the EPA was completed. There was something said around the ILR. So let's just reread the question again.
Yeah, so is the end date that goes on the ILR, is this the date that is provided on the 4th working day?
No, the 4th working day is just the date that the ESFA window for upload opens up. So don't. I think that it's synced with the ILR update return date as well. So that those two dates are synced. But what I'm saying is that the deadline for us to put in any data onto ESFA or ILR is the 4th working day. So not to be confused with the EPA end date, obviously.
One last question. So what is the time frame for onboarding to Smart EPA from Contracts Commission again?
There is no timeline. As soon as you have signed a contract, even if you have apprentices who need to take their EPA in 6 months or 8 months' time, you can get onboarded onto Smart EPA directly. The sooner you register your apprentices on Smart EPA, the better, because you can, once you have got a user account set up, you can access all of the resources through Smart EPA. So that's the benefit for you to actually make sure that you have that user account set up and your apprentices registered. But you just need to make sure that the last date or the minimum timeline that we are recommending for you to register the apprentices on Smart EPA is 2 months prior to the anticipated EPA date.
One other question has come through. I'll read it out. Do you have any examples of a portfolio?
Not sure what you mean by the examples of a portfolio. We do not have an e-portfolio system, if that's what you mean. The Smart EPA, you can upload an electronic portfolio. It has a facility to accommodate that storage. If you are using Smart Assessor, for example, as part of your training delivery, then currently Smart EPA is not integrated with Smart Assessor, but I know that that's on the roadmap for Smart Apprentices to make happen. But you can obviously download the e-portfolio and then upload it onto Smart EPA as well.
If not on SEPA, how can we access the resources on SEPA that are available on our website?
So we've got only some basic information on our website. We have just an example EPA specification, for example, and we've got some links to additional paid for resources which direct you to different parts of the business. If you have signed a contract, you can access our EPA specification and resources, but I'm not sure why you would want to do that separately without actually registering your apprentice on the system. You don't have to register your apprentices on Smart EPA before you can access the resources. You can access the resources once you have a user account set up on Smart EPA, and you can set up a user account on CPA once you signed a contract with us. So it's that sequence that is followed. So whatever you do, you need to sign a contract with us first, you get onboarded onto Smart EPA, and then you get a user account which allows you to access the resources specific to the standards that you are contracted with us for.
And one last question, are there mock tests available?
Yes, indeed. So for all the standards that have test as a component, all the sample assessment tests would be uploaded onto Smart EPA as well.
There are no more questions now, so I guess we can wrap up.
Yep, great. So if you do have any more questions that you think of, please do send it to us by email. I'm sure Sapna will send out following the webinar some details where you can email your questions.